Hello there. I'm gonna wait a second to make sure that you can hear and see me all right. Hello there, Artur K. I am well. How are you? Over in the YouTube chat. Hey, Lord Catonic. Somebody let me know if you can hear me and that it sounds okay. It's always got to wait for the delay. You can hear you? A lot of ween. You still have no sound? Artur and Lord Catonic say they can hear. So I think it must not be on my end. All right then. Yeah, I got you, Lord Catonic. All right. Well, welcome to another Storytime with Max. If you aren't familiar with me, I am Max Porter. I'm the lore keeper, board game designer, writer, editor, stream runner, and tonight, reader of stories on stream for your viewing and listening pleasure. Of course you had it muted, Lottoing. All right, well, tonight I'm going to read The Becoming Picts, Part 3. Brood in the Picts, Part 3. Now, this is a bit on the longer side. It took me a few more words to wrap up the story of the becoming story of the Picts than I expected, so it got to be pretty hefty. So we'll see how far we get. I might not finish the whole read through tonight, or I might. We'll see. All right. So, just to catch you up in case it's been a while since you read Part 2 or heard me read Part 2, Brood has just led his warriors out from the village and have kind of circled through another tribe's territory in order to come upon the invading Tuahadidanan forces from an unexpected angle. However, in so doing, Brood and his Picts ran afoul of this other tribe, and some combat ensued, and Brood kind of cut through all his enemies with ease until he started fighting a particular warrior who turned out to be a woman, which he didn't immediately realize in the dark. But now they are confronting one another, having clashed and found the other one equal in skill, at least. All right. So that's the bit of story that just led into this. So without further ado, Picts Part 3. Brood watched the woman in the moonlight. Her eyes darted about, never still, even as the light itself moved, leaves and branches overhead, swaying in the wind and rain. She was like a creature of the land itself, he thought distractedly, moving the same way the moonlight moves in the storm. She turned back to him as the thunder faded, her deep gaze piercing. We must stop killing one another, for now. I can speak for my tribe. Can you for yours? In answer, Brood filled his lungs and hopped onto the fallen log behind him, raising his face to be tickled by the sky. Hear me, my warriors! Brood Brede Macbilly now calls. To me, warriors, and cease your killing. His shout rang out clearly above the rumble of the storm. Lowering his face, he watched in wonder as the woman simply made a series of gestures with her sword, the blade flashing in moonlight, and her own forces began to melt out of the storm-tossed shadows. As his troops gathered in answer to his shout, Brood saw with a jolt in his chest that their numbers had diminished already. They had come upon their opponents unexpectedly, without ever reaching their true goal, and had fought in unfamiliar territory in terrible conditions. As the two groups were revealed in another flash of lightning, Brood watched the glittering eyes of the other tribe's leader as she looked about and whispered to her warriors. The initial surprise and sudden clash over, tradition and procedure were taking precedence. The young king must now adopt a conciliatory tone, trespassing as he was, without intent to perform a raid. The storm was only growing worse, however, and the pelting rain refused to let up. Brood shielded his eyes with his hand and was about to sheathe his weapon when someone came up to him on his left. Psst! Brood glanced down to see the insistent face of one of his warriors. It was not Necton, but one of his cronies. The heavy-set, powerful woman named Mael. Her broad face was set with determined lines and painted in traditional shapes. She was bleeding from 2 cuts across her chest and still carried her naked blade in her hand. Brood tried not to sigh as he leaned down to listen to the older Pict, who whispered in a scratchy voice, barely audible over the patter of the leaves. My king, let us not be taken in by this ruse. We should attack now, while they are talking. They will not expect it, and we can crush them and take their lands for ourselves. Brood hushed her with a gesture, glancing across at the opposing Pictish warrior woman with alarm to see if she had heard. She was looking straight at them with an otherworldly, intense expression, waiting to see what he would do. Brood whispered back, Don't be a fool, Mael. Go and see to our wounded, and theirs as well. Anyone you can find, save their lives, as it may help us. Mael's face twisted with frustration and annoyance, but she was skilled as a healer. Brood knew her well. She would not betray his trust, though she might complain bitterly. Fortunately, Mael chose to back away as the leader of the opposing force stepped forward. Her hands rested lightly on her hips, and she adopted the stance of a proud raid leader, a noble of her tribe. Brood Brede Macbilly, I heard you call yourself, otherwise called Brood Macbile, or Brood Macbile, it's more fun to say. Known are you to us, you and your people. I am called Ethne, my father, Kinad. I ask you now, why do you come into our forest and raise arms against us? As the high winds tore away a strip of cloud high above, the glade was illuminated in silver moonlight once more. Brood's eyes widened as he saw Ethne's tattoos shifting, changing. They lent force to her words, their shapes inscrutable to him in the moment, but certainly allowing her to tap into ancient knowledge and power. A queen of a rival tribe of Picts. She was following the formal procedure now, using words that commanded a kingly response. Brood nodded his head and spread his hands in the rain, which was falling more lightly now. It might seem as though the storm were ending, but he suspected worse weather was coming. A mistake, Ethne Mac Kinad. It is unfortunate that we crossed weapons and drew blood, but we sought only the destruction of the invaders' camp that lies near this place. Would that we had not trespassed, accidentally, and in the dark, but it cannot be helped. Perhaps at another time and another place, we could have had a more pleasant exchange. This last he had added to the strict formalities of conduct, prompted by something within his own shifting tattoos. There was some power, some deep magic at play here he could not quite understand. Ethne gave him an odd look, not quite smiling as the wind in the trees increased still further in force, blowing wet branches and leaves across the open space between them. Very well. However, you may not pass these woods at this time. Turn yourself around, Brood, and return to your own lands. It is not given to you to travel on to the camp of the invaders this night, blundering blindly as you are. Go, and we will see to the price of this trespass later. That may not be needed, Brood responded hopefully. Even now my best healer seeks for the wounded of both sides, and will return those that may be saved to their places. The young king hoped deeply that, in the short exchange, there might not have been many casualties, only cuts and bruises. It had been a furious few minutes, however. Ethne nodded, and gestured gently but firmly back in the direction Brood had come. He looked up and down his line of warriors, and was pleased to see Mael helping 2 or 3 warriors through the trees, glistening in the moonlight. They were limping, and it would be some time before they were fit to fight again, but it seemed likely that no deaths would come of this accidental bloodshed. "Come, warriors," he said then, in a tone that brooked no further disagreements. They turned and faded back into the forest, knowing that Ethne's tribe would follow at a respectful distance, and stop at the border stream, but no farther. In the manner that befit their honorable retreat, they took up a column formation, with the injured at the back, easiest for navigating the forest pathways and byways safely. Once again, Brood tried to settle back into this running rhythm of the forest at night, pattering his way through the dripping leaves. It was unusually difficult, however. His tattoos were shifting again, trying to tell him something. He examined the pattern, in brief pauses using the moonlight, but found the messages confusing and obscure. Perhaps the night's adventures were not quite over, but it seemed more enigmatic. There was still a sense of wrongness, strangeness in the forest. An increasing scent of dread, a different rhythm to the trees. Some other force was present, a knowledge of the woods with a different beat, a strange and otherworldly pattern that was coming to conquer the Picts. A very different sort of enemy from a rival tribe. They might squabble, but they shared many of the same values. They knew the ways of their people, and this tribe had struck him as noble, and led by such a woman. He was jolted from these thoughts by a flash of lightning, which gave him a glimpse of a face through the trees. The king paused in his run, keenly aware of the positions that his warriors had taken, traveling through the forest in a tight column. The face had been grinning, and some distance outside the area currently filled with his running troops. It had seemed to have horns, and a distinct lack of war paint or tattoos. With a whistle and a quick series of gestures in the moonlight, Brood signaled down his column of warriors to turn and fight. They were spread out, but if this was no more than a few scouts from the Tuatha, they should be all right. The king drew his blade, dripping with rainwater, and his Picts matched the motion. Brood blinked, blood from his brow mixing with the rain. He could feel a heaviness descend, a weight to the air. There was also a strange power thrumming in the wind, a vibration of power and change. The Veilstorm was coming, and with it, the enemy. Hey folks, sorry about that. The laptop charger cable fell out again, as has happened before to me, and so without realizing it, the laptop was swiftly dying. Without me realizing it, the laptop was swiftly dying. So, and before it restarted itself. So it's been an up and down stream today. Hopefully, hopefully I didn't lose y'all. No, it says Fang Ban. Okay, can you hear me again? I'll wait a moment before I pick up the thread of the story once more. Stupid laptop died on me again. We can hear you again. Start from the beginning. I'm not going to do that. Alright. Sorry about that. Alright, where was I? Becoming Picts Part 3. Brood blinked, blood from his brow mixing with the rain. He could feel a heaviness descend, a weight to the air. There was also a strange power thrumming in the wind, a vibration of change. The Veilstorm was coming, and with it, the enemy. Arrows hissed their deadly arcs through the air, aimed with great skill through the branches and leaves. One struck home, and in the strangely muted air, Brood heard one of his own let out an awful gurgle. He shouted, and his warriors charged forward, howling and screaming. Brood, running, leapt to a nearby branch and looked along the battle lines. Spells and sharpened blades flashed as his own warriors turned, screaming defiance and rage at the invaders. More arrows flew, hissing in the dark, even as the winds picked up their pace in the tops of the trees. And still more arrows. Too many. Brood cursed as he jumped from the branch and landed heavily on a Tuatha De Danann soldier, stabbing down with his sword blade again and again. There were too many of them, and Brood's forces were too disorganized. He had truly misjudged his abilities as a commander. This trained army had attacked at the worst possible moment, when his forces were unprepared. Brood charged into the thick of the fighting to do what he could. His blade singing, he cut and hacked his way through their line. There were too many, far more than Drest had seen. Perhaps, if he had taken them unawares as he intended, his Picts could still have prevailed. But now, it seemed to Brood as he ducked a spear strike and countered with a savage slash, things looked hopeless. Another spear came out of nowhere, wielded by a tall, powerful Tuathan with a silver arm. Brood had just barely time to see the moonlight flash on a broad leaf-shaped spear tip before it pierced his side, plunging 6 inches of hardened wood into his body. Everything seemed to slow down and speed up at once. As the Tuathan soldier leaned into the blow, throwing Brood off balance, the pain struck him with blinding intensity. Stars crossed his vision, brighter than the lightning flashes. The enemy smiled a little, his flashing teeth beneath his wooden helmet. Brood was conscious of the falling warriors nearby. Tired, already bloody and surprised, they were quickly losing heart and hope. He stumbled backward, holding a hand over the vicious wound. It was deep. He could feel the pain in his core. The enemy followed, eyes alight with a desire to kill Brood. As he drew back his spear for the killing thrust, another figure flashed into Brood's view. Blood spurted, and there was a flash of blades and blue paint on skin. Straining to catch his breath, Brood watched as Ethne pulled her short blade from the enemy's chest, the metal dripping crimson as the man coughed and struggled. Her teeth flashed again, smiling at Brood as the Tuathan soldier collapsed, gasping his last breath in the mud. "Thank you." Brood tried not to wince, as speaking made his wound throb, leaking his blood down his side, a red streak against his tattoos. He pulled a bandage from his satchel and began tying up the wound as best he could. "Now you venture forth from your own territory to aid us? And a good thing we did. Else it would be you lying here." She towed the dying man, wiping her blade on a patch of moss and listening to the sounds of chaotic battle all around. Her face darkened, a grim expression Brood could barely see in the moonlight. "But it is not enough. We could see their column moving through the forest as we followed you out of our lands. There are many Tuatha and many more are coming. Even with our tribes fighting together, we are far outnumbered. Brood Bride Macbile." "You come to our aid? Even against such odds, Ethne?" Brood finished tying off his bandage, already soaked by the rain and his blood. He would have to find a healer like Mael soon, if she hadn't already been cut down herself. The Pictish woman laughed, though the sound was overwhelmed by a rolling rumble of thunder. The storm seemed to be gathering its strength for greater and more terrible violence. Without offering him a hand, Ethne nodded her head and gestured with her bloody weapon for Brood to follow. "Come. There is a clear glade where we can gather our warriors and make a stand." Brood grunted, hopping over the tangled roots and rain-dripping branches in her wake. "Yes, best to gather them all and see if we can pierce through to strike for better ground. I think all we can do now is try to stop them before they reach your village." This Brood heard muttered over her shoulder, just before she dove through the leaves and into the next fight. A pair of soldiers turned, spears at the ready, and Brood found himself protecting her back as Ethne slashed and cut her way through, her movements little more than flickers of reflected moonlight in the storm. All right, folks. Sorry for the interruption, but hopefully you were able to hear some of the story. I'm about almost exactly halfway through part 3 here, so I'm going to stop there for now and read the next half of part 3 next time, probably next week. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. I hope you had fun hearing me read our most recently published lore story. It was in the the newsletter last week. It's on our website as well if you'd prefer to read it. So I'm going to say see you later, and for now, and join us tomorrow. Let's see, we'll have Morning with Max, so I'll be kind of doing a hosting and hello and how are you thing, just a chat in the morning, and then the end of week wrap up in the afternoon with Q&A. So join us tomorrow for both of those streams if you can, and yeah, thanks a lot. See you later.